Testing, testing. All right, we are in run-up mode. Looks like we have good stream health today. Yay for that. Woohoo. See a couple of folks joining us in the chat already today. That's good. That's always a good sign. I think this was a good choice going back to just straight YouTube streams instead of the Google Hangouts. That might have been a bit ambitious. Especially given how wonky Google Hangouts can be. So we are about 6 minutes to showtime, folks. So I tend to, I like to come on and kind of chit-chat a little bit. Sort of do my, I call it the run-up time, you know, where I'm kind of testing the stream. Don't cross the streams. Damn it, Vinkman. You know, where I like to test the stream out and kind of run things through a little bit. Try to get some of my brain farts out before we're actually doing this thing for real. So, Mr. Gregory Cook is with us in chat. I see Susan is there. 5 people watching. Something. Considering that we're not even really on yet. Good thing. So today is going to be kind of like jam-packed because I know I feel like last week I kind of I tried to cover a lot of stuff that kind of came together a little strangely for me. So I'm going to be sort of going back over some of that stuff this week a little bit in my recap, and then we're going to be moving forward with some really cool stuff. Should be fun. Yeah, should be an interesting day. So. So, just because I know I've got a lot I'm going to try to pack in today and I don't want to run too far over schedule, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Although, just so you guys know, I'm watching my stream indicator on another machine, and it says that it just went like yellow-orange. So it was green, now it's saying yellow-orange. I wish YouTube gave us better, better metrics on that. But, if there's any issue with the stream, let me know. Our ISP here has been a little wonky over the last week, and I'm not real happy with them. So if anything, chops or gets weird or whatever, just let me know, and I can backpedal and kind of redress things and all that kind of stuff. So, if I could get a quick heads up from everybody, how's the stream seem to be rolling right now? Let me do some stuff so there's a little bit of screen activity, and then we can kind of talk about that for a second, because that's sort of an important thing to have rolling here at 3 minutes till showtime. Enrico is with us. Enrico, hello Enrico. Enrico, I love that name. Good. Okay, Susan says hi. Silas Ayanami. I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong, but I'm trying. Silas Ayanami joins us. Says stream seems good. Susan says it cut out twice so far for me. Yeah, but you're on the West Coast, Susan. So yeah. I don't know. I blame everything on the West Coast. So there you go. All right. Yeah, last week, just so you guys know, last week in the middle of my stream, I had to, or toward the end of the show actually, I had to cut the stream for a minute and change some things in the software so that it would like forcibly hit the YouTube ingest servers. So those things are weird. Apparently there's like 2 addresses for YouTube video ingest, and the software that I typically use tries to, like, it has settings in it to automatically hit one or the other. But I've noticed sometimes if the stream gets weird, if I pop into that software real quick and change it and manually go to custom and manually force it, then it seems to reconnect and stay a stronger connection. So I've left my settings that way this week, but hopefully it's hopefully it'll stay strong. So, Susan says it's raining. It's raining on the West Coast. Well, it is a bright, sunny, beautiful spring day here in southern Ohio, and I'm kind of digging it. It's judging from the temperature and the way everything looks, it's getting probably about another couple weeks, and we'll be able to go fishing. Dirty Cook, meaning in Midwest. You're in KC, that's Kansas City, I'm guessing. So, rain in Kansas City. That means there's probably rain headed our way here before the day's out. Joy. You guys can keep it. All you guys out west, y'all can keep it. So Kansas City, get my geography right, you're on the other side of the Mississippi from us. So yeah, you guys can just keep the rain on the other side of the river. All right. Well, it is 1 o'clock. Looks like I didn't actually get to toddle around on my run up. And I am probably about to sneeze. Oh my God, what a way to start the show. Pardon me. And there's 2, usually a third. Where's the third? Maybe not, maybe not. Okay. So, it is 1 o'clock and we are back for another of our CG Bytes Artist Development Seminars. This week is part 2 of our flowing hair demonstration and teaching you guys some things about really expanding on how you make hair for Daz Studio. Last week we went over a lot of stuff, covered a lot of ground, and this week is going to be no different. I am going to recap just a little bit. So let's go ahead and hit the ground running with this. I have all my assets open over in Zbrush already that you guys saw created last week. So let's just make sure all of that is open. So, and I did mention last week that there was a freebie coming with this. I decided to hold off on pushing that through to you guys until this week because I want to give it to you all at once. I think it'll make more sense that way, where you'll have the finished product from the from seeing everything get rigged and all that. You'll have all that stuff. Plus, in the course of working on what would be that final product and doing the seminars themselves, I generated a fair number of ZBrush assets that are really, really, really handy. There's a bunch of Fibermesh presets that are great for getting the hair started. I think I talked about those a little bit last week. And once I remove the actual Genesis 3 female mesh from this subtool, I'm going to give you guys a copy of this exact tool for ZBrush that has the scalp, transition hairs, front left, front right, and rear hair sections already made in it. So you guys will be able to not only use this to look at and learn from, but when we release this hair piece, which it needs the clear testing at CG Bytes, it's company policy there. But once it clears testing, then this will go out as a freebie from CG Bytes. And if you guys wanted, you could then use this asset to quickly make your own add-ons for that set of hair. So some of what I'm going to be going over today is really geared toward not only creating your own original hair pieces, but it'll also show you how to take something like this. If you have access to these kind of assets, it'll show you how to take this and expand on it. and I think there's ways that can work out in the context of the market, and actually selling product that is incredibly useful. So there's some things that I actually kind of have cooking on the back burner that hopefully I can roll out for you guys at some point, and maybe maybe make a special thing just for folks at CG Bytes. So we'll see how that goes. But oh, hey, Terry's here. Hey, Terry. So anyway, forgive me for the lapse in a freebie for the week, but it's really because I wanted to make sure that I combine all this stuff together into a nice fat suite of tools for you to use for hair creation. So it's actually pretty cool. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump in here, because this is really going to open up a lot of things for you. And what I'm about to show, when you get these assets, this is going to be the thing that is kind of a lot of the usage for these assets if you wanted to make add-ons for this hair. And getting to this point, which we did last week, from here on you'll see ways to expand on the functionality of the hair and do all kinds of cool stuff with it. So let's go ahead and get into that. So the way that we built this hair, this is, just for the record, this is just one approach to it. There's actually a lot of different ways that we can use these tools. In this two-part series, I wanted to just kind of pick a single direction and say, okay, this is this method. We may come back and redress hair again a couple times down the road, because there are so many different ways to go about it. There's really not a wrong way. There's just, there's lots of different methods and techniques. And so I feel like, one of the things that's part of my job is to help you guys pick up as many different techniques as possible. So what we've done these past couple of weeks is focused on a set that I'm really fond of. So by way of a quick recap, what we did last week is we brought in the Genesis 3 female, subdivided her up, and then pulled a scalp mesh from that, which we can see here. And the way that we did that was just through masking the G3 female subdivided, masking off the area that we wanted, then doing an extraction, then Z-remeshing that, and getting it down to a nice low resolution. Here we're only 903 polys for that. And then we used UV Master to do UVs for that. And here you can see what the UV template for that looks like when shown on here. And I'm gonna discipline myself for a moment, because as I'm looking at this and thinking about UVs, I'm reminded of a post that I wrote up the other day for the CG Bytes Facebook group that was a rather deep, I didn't think about it at the time just how deep of an explanation it was, but it's actually a rather deep explanation of what UVs are, because a lot of times I hear things in conversation and questions and things that I hear people often refer to, for instance, like this image map. They would refer to that as the UV. It's not the UVs. That's an image map. The UVs are the coordinates per vertex that tell software where that vertex corresponds in two-dimensional UV space. And I wrote a really long, in-depth post about that, because it's something that I hear a lot, and it makes, not only does it make conversation sometimes about this stuff a little on the difficult side, it also it shows that because the communication of that subject matter has traditionally been kind of opaque and hard to follow, I think that it's in the communication of that and understanding the nature of how 3 dimensions convert to 2, that we lose our ability to communicate. And so a lot of times there's questions people have and comments and things that the question itself kind of shows that, oh, they haven't gotten this concept down yet. So anyway, go if you're here, hopefully you're in the in our group on Facebook, and you've seen the posts and things there, and read up on stuff there. And from time to time, I like to pop in there and drop things that are kind of important bits of information or whatever. And so the thing on UVs was kind of a big one that I really felt needed to be touched on. And hopefully from there, it'll explain like how there's things like how your texture template, the image that shows you what your UVs look like. That template actually doesn't really do anything. It's just an image. Just like the textures you paint to sit on the mesh. So, anyway, oh, and Jason popped in a link for the groups there. Very cool. Appreciate that. So, and, always got to give props to Terry and Jason, who kind of man the chat and keep track of things, and Jason sharing links and stuff like that for us as we're going on. That's awesome. Love that. Thank you for that. So so anyway, here you can see what our UVs look like on this. They're very very solid, and you can judge your UVs, the quality of your UVs, really just by how crisp and clear your wireframe renders out into a texture map when you use the command over here, the UV check command, new from UV check. So if we were to turn that off and we wanted to just kind of get a quick look at our UVs or a representation of the UVs, and we wanted to do that, we would just hit new from UV check while we have polyframe turned on, and then turn polyframe off, and you'll see that it takes those polyframe lines and renders them into an image map. So, which that's also, just as a sidebar, is a great way to make, if you want to make 2D UV templates, that's a great way to do that inside Zbrush, is just open the model and use that. So, here we have our scalp, and we have our UVs on it. Now, one thing that I didn't complete last week, I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now, as soon as I finish my recap, is painting the texture for the scalp. So, but what we did last week is we pulled the scalp, we ran Z-Remesher to get a good topology, and we tweaked on that a few times, and you can go back and kind of get the rewatch and kind of see how that worked out, and then shot the UVs, which you see here. So we also took a copy of the subdivided mesh that we pulled off for the scalp and broke that into 3 groups using masking. So you just paint the mask, Control W, like that. And then we grew the fibers from those groups. So there you can see the fibers that I grew. And when you grow fibers out like that, this is kind of a handy thing to note, and it's sort of a lead-in to a future version of this hair methodology that I'll teach. When you have polygroups made like this, and you grow hair from the whole thing, grow fibers from the whole thing, and then you accept that, the newly created hair subtool, fiber subtool, will have these polygroups reflected in it. So there's a usage for that doesn't necessarily pertain to what we're doing here. It kind of opens the door to a slightly different method, a variation on how I'm working here. So, but it's just a good thing to note since we can see it right here. So here we created these groups, and then we would isolate each one and create fibers in Fibermesh, hit preview, and then accept. Of course, I tweaked on some settings, and those settings will be made available as part of the freebies, and the little bundle that I was talking about for this stuff. We did that for each of these groups, and the reason I did it that way, one at a time, is so that I would get separated subtools that I then named based on left, right, and rear of the hair. Left front, right front, and rear of the hair. And then I also went around the outer edge and made masked that off and created another set of hair called transition hair. And that's something that's easy to overlook, but I find that you'll get greater realism in a hair piece if you have small hair fibers around the edge of your transmapped scalp, and that just kind of helps blend things in. With I call them baby hairs. It gives you those little bitty hairs. So that was the primary thing that we did last week in creating the fibers, and then from there we walked through actually shaping the fibers, talked a bit about fiber resolution, how those strips need to look and lay and all that sort of thing. Then of course, once you have your subtools for Fibermesh created, then each of those you need to go into the UV map menu and hit the Fibermesh button, which if we move down to one of these, you can see we have Fiber UV is available there. So I'll walk through these just so you can see this done again one more time. So I'll hit Fiber UV on each of these. Okay. And at the moment I have a temporary texture loaded in for each of these as well. I'll just turn that on. I tend to work with my transmap as the texture map in my fibers inside Zbrush only because of preview. That way I can turn on transparency for those and have, see some of that transparency around the tips of those strips, and it gives me a nice clean representation of, or a closer representation of what I'm going to have once this gets over into Studio and, and is set up for rendering and everything. So, still, when we're working with a lot of polygons like this, having any textures turned on in here can really bog down your viewport. So I'll actually turn that stuff off frequently and just turn it back on when I want to get a look at where I'm at with things. Okay. So that kind of sums up the gist of what we did last week with creating the hair. I think I did talk a little bit about groups and setting up groups inside the Fibermesh subtools, and setting those groups up in a way that when you export it, you can do some nifty stuff in a text editor where you replace your group commands in the OBJ with MTL commands that then when it reads into Studio, it will read in as surfaces. That is kind of a weird process. I probably shouldn't have put that in there last week, but I was kind of swinging wild with that, and I thought it'd be a cool thing to throw in there. Actually, I'm going to be showing you a different method this week of quickly randomizing your materials on hair so that you can put different textures on it and do some things there. So you'll see that shortly. So here we have all of our meshes and everything are created. We can hide our G3 female. We can also hide our hair group source, which I have. And at this point, I have visible everything that I need. Let's make sure everything is set to lowest resolution. And so from here, I will merge these into a new tool. And the reason is that right now they're subtools, and as subtools you can't export them all together as one OBJ. So I need to get those all together as one OBJ so that I can send that over to Studio and work from there. Now, whenever you go to merge tools or an OBJ export, when you're going to use multiple subtools and export them all as one OBJ like this, make sure, like if I could have a flashing red light on screen right now, it would be. It would just burn this into everyone's brain. Make sure that in your merge menu, the UV button is ticked. Make sure of that. Because if it's not, when you hit merge visible and it creates a new tool from this with all these things combined together, it won't carry the UVs over, and that will suck. So let's hit merge visible. Do not do merge down. If you hit merge down, then it's going to merge inside this original subtool, and you do not want that. You want to keep this tool separated, and you're going to see why here shortly. So we want to merge visible, and you'll see that up here in our little tool bin, our little catalog here, it gives us a tool that says merged scalp, and that has all of those visible subtools in it, and they all have their UVs. So at this point, I have all of those grouped by their subtool as well. Okay, so we should end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. There's everything there. And then we would export that. And here I've already exported it. So we export that, and then we're going to import that into Daz Studio. So let's bring that in. Okay. So here we are with our hair imported into Studio. And from here, the first thing I'm going to do is go into Edit, Figure, Transfer Utility. Our source will be the Genesis 3 female. Our scene item will be the hair mesh we just brought in. And this is one of those times where it's really important to use a projection template, because the projection templates in here, the default for shoulder length hair or short hair, are nice because they kick out a lot of excess bones that you don't really need. So I'm also, though, where I exported that with groups intact, with those different groups set up, I'm going to make one change in my transfer utility here, and that is I'm going to uncheck face groups, because I want to keep those groups, and if that's on, it will remove all polygons from those groups coming out of Zbrush. So we want to turn that off. Let's see, weight maps, remove unused bones, yes. Hidden facets, hierarchies, okay, this is all good. This is the big one right here, is make sure with this method, working from Zbrush, where we're using these groups this way, because you really don't want to have to try and regroup that stuff. It's just so much better. It saves you so many fits if you make sure you catch this. So hit accept, and now we have our hair on the figure with basic bones in it. So yeah, hey, how you doing? Hi, hi. Okay. So at this point, I want to select that hair. We can see the hierarchy inside it. And then I'm going to go into my geometry editor, and here you can see we have our face groups. Those come over numbered from Zbrush. And there's a number of things having those groups intact will let us do. Right off, if we just go through and hide those, you can see we can hide those very easily. We can make selections, all kinds of interesting stuff. Here we can also see that I'm going to need, it looks like I had a little bit of shrinkage on the scalp, so we'll fix that shortly. That's not that big of a deal. But here we can see the scalp. And so what I'm doing at the moment is kind of turning on and off different groups so I can see what is what, since it just gives numerical names. If anyone from Pixelogic is listening, it would be great if you guys would give us the ability to name our groups. Thank you. Anyway, if you double-click a group, you can change the name. So I'm going to call this one Scalp. And then I'll also click the plus sign, and that's going to give me a polygon selection from that. And I can either right-click here, or I can right-click out here and go to Geometry Assignment. And in this second section here, go Create Surface from Selected, and we'll call that Scalp. So now that has a material applied to it. So next, let's just look at each of these. So that's going to be our hair. I'm going to call it our hair for the moment. I'm actually going to end up altering that a little bit later on, but for right now we're just organizing. Okay, so here's our hair, and I've got a method here for how I'm going to divide up materials. So right now this is going to be just our hair. Okay, I've selected this, all the polys for this group. I'll right click and create surface from selection, and I'm going to call this our hair strands. Okay. Then this is going to be trans hairs. Okay. And we'll select that. Right click, go to Geometry Assignment, create surface from selected. I'm going to call that one trans hairs. Then this is going to be L hair. And again, just like with R hair, eventually I'm going to make a slight change to that, but you'll see when the time comes. When you see it happen, it should make sense what I'm doing. So then with its polys selected, I'll right click and go to geometry assignment, create face group from selected, and we'll call that one L hair strands. And the reason that I'm doing this, the reason that I'm creating these materials, these surfaces for each of these in this way, it gives me a starting point. Like it's organizational. Right now I'm doing broad strokes, and I'm naming the left hair, the right hair, and the rear of the hair. Then eventually we're going to add randomization to strands in each of those sections. And what that's going to do is give us the ability, we could either apply the same texture across all of the strands, we'll be able to apply different textures across different strands for randomization, and have a lot of room to play around with materials and the way things look just in how we apply different textures, different colors, different setups, all kinds of stuff across those. So this is what I'm showing you here is a way to create a hair that is extremely versatile. So I'm very big on getting those bang for my buck out of anything that I make, and I want the end user to be able to do the same. So customizability and stuff like that is key, especially in something like hair that naturally is just so random and chaotic. So that can have so many variations in it just by its nature. So let's move on. Let's hide the. Let's see. Oh, did I? Oh, I accidentally made that a group instead of a surface. Let's correct that. So still have those selected. So let's assign those back to their original group, and we will remove that group. Create surface from selected. L hair strands. Okay. And then this is going to be the rear hair. And then, you guessed it, rear hair strand. Now, I'm going to save the rest of my surface creation work for much, much later. Right now, I like having these simpler groups, these simpler surfaces made, because we can make selections based on these surfaces. So as we work, we're going to end up busting these groups up into smaller groups that'll correspond to some of the advanced rigging we're going to bring in with joints. So having these simpler surface groups right now, it both gives us a means of organizing the surface work that we're going to eventually be doing with randomizing hair and all that. But in the short term, it also gives us a means of selecting these broad groups much more easily. So that's why we're not going to finish that part out just yet. That'll hold off for a bit. So at this point, we are ready to begin adding our joints, adding our custom joints. And this is kind of a big deal to me when it comes to hair. I've looked around, and in preparation for this two-parter, just in full transparency, I very rarely use products from anybody else. I've been doing this stuff for a very long time, and I have a lot of stuff sitting here. I make a lot of, make all my own stuff. And so one of the interesting things for me in doing what I'm doing here with teaching you guys is that there's a different perspective that I have on actually using any of this software and doing this stuff that is a little unique, because I've always made my own stuff. So the first time around that I was teaching hair, I taught it really very much kind of from my perspective. This time around, though, I went and looked at some popular hair kits that are out there in various places, and kind of looked at different things that people are doing, because through the years, when I've done stuff like this, I've had people say things about, oh, well, yours is so different. Yours does this, that, or the other. And so I always thought that was cool, but I never really stopped to compare. And so in preparation for this two-part series on hair, I went and did a little research and poked around, looked at some different stuff, picked up some different hair kits from folks, and what I saw kind of blew my mind a little bit. The vast majority of hair that's out there and I'm saying this, I could be wrong, but I mean, this is from the feedback I get, and then from what I saw in doing some research on it, the majority of it is a static hair piece that sits on the head, and it may have a bunch of morphs on it, but they're just morphs. They're just vertices moving. And you guys have probably, if you've listened to any of these or watched any of these in the past, you've heard me say, morphs are one thing, but they're not the only thing. They're not the only means of deformation. And I like using joints whenever I can. I like using bone-based deformations for lots of things, and specifically anything that should have a pivot point. Anything where the movement needs to be rotational. If we just take an arm, for instance, okay? No one thinks that the bending of that arm is a morph. That's not a morph. That's a joint moving, okay? That's a joint. That's rotational. Changing the shape of the arm is a morph because it's moving vertices inside object space. So what I found, and the reason I point that out is you wouldn't try to build a figure and think, oh, I want the arm to go up and sculpt it up, because it's going to travel in a straight line. The vertices are going to travel in a straight line and not follow that arc. So you can see, just looking at the bounding box there, how that arcs around. So you wouldn't do that. That just doesn't make sense. Morphs don't travel that way. They travel in a straight vector from point A to point B. They are where the vertices start, and they go to where you sculpt for them to go, and they go there in a straight line. Well, hair doesn't move in straight lines, and that has always bothered me. And then when I start looking around at hair kits out there, I see a lot of morphs, and those morphs are good to a point, but there's a real lack of natural movement, because short of doing a hair simulation, which is a whole other thing to discuss one day, short of doing a simulation, if you want that hair to move and at least emulate natural movement, it needs to be rotational, because hair has an obvious pivot point, that being the root. So I like to do hair that has joint-based movements. And even when I sculpt things in, like styles or other kind of object space types of movements, I still like to incorporate a lot of joint-based movement, because it's going to be rotational, and it's going to be more natural, and it's also more versatile. So that's kind of why I'm showing you what I'm about to get into, and why we're going to do all this crazy rigging stuff that you're going to see here in just a moment. So, without further ado, let's get into this then. Let's select in my scene hierarchy the hair. And of course, right now you'll notice I can't select that hair in the viewport. That's because we didn't let the transfer utility create groups based on the underlying figure in there. So if you don't have those groups, then the mesh won't be selectable in the viewport. That's fine though, because we can select that newly created figure in our scene tab. And so where we're going to go in here is we'll just walk down our hierarchy all the way down until we see the head joint. Okay? And just so we have something selectable, I'm going to go ahead and go into my joint editor. Okay. So that we can see our bones. And I'm going to associate with the head joint that scalp groove. So now we could right click and select scalp. We would be selecting the head of the hairpiece. So once we have that, the next step then is to start creating the bones that we need for our hairs. So in order to do that, I like to start off from a front view, and let's just hit Control F and zoom in. And then I will right click and hit Create Child Bone, and I'm going to name this L hair _1, and that _1 is important to your workflow, at least I find, because if I have that _1 there, then the next thing I'm going to do to create other bones downstream from it will pick up the naming, and it saves me from having to type, and I like anything that saves me from having to type. So we put the name in, and I'm just hitting the tab key to go down here. It automatically puts that in. Our rotation order, since these are vertically oriented, we want this to be, I'm going to use YZX. You could use anything that has Y first, because the first letter is your up axis. We're going to use YZX, and we'll hit accept, and now you'll see we have a joint in place. There's a couple of quick changes I'm going to make to the way the joint editor works, and it's just two little settings, and these don't stick, so they won't be turned on when you come back to it. I'm going to turn on auto align node, and then snap, auto snap endpoints. And this is totally going to screw up the head joint for a minute, but you'll see what I do to get the head joint restored back. To me, this is something Daz needs to look into, a means of locking joints so that they don't take on any effect from these commands. But I find that it's much more intuitive to move my joints around with these auto snaps turned on. So I will just go ahead, and with that auto snap turned on, I'm going to move that left hair joint over. And then after I've moved it, I'm going to select the head and right click and go restore selected nodes rigging. And the reason I need to do that, as you could see, the strangeness that happened there for a moment, is because with those auto snaps turned on, when I move that new bone that's downstream from the head, it's going to try to snap the end point of the head and rotate it and make it follow. It's going to make all of our rigging just go completely nuts. So that's just a little thing to keep in mind. I like having those auto snaps on, though, because once I have those, okay, let's just put that back in place, and then right click the head and restore selected nodes rigging. Once I have that in place, pardon me, then it makes it much easier to create my subsequent bones. So let's go ahead and I'm going to create the right hair bone, and then I'll rename it. So let's right click, go to create, duplicate bones, and you'll see here the next bone that it creates that was duplicated, it immediately names it L hair _2. We don't want that at the moment. We're going to right click and go to edit, rename node, and this is going to be R hair _1. Okay. And then once we have it named thus, with that prefix, if I select the left hair bone and I right click and go to edit, mirror joints, you'll see that it will snap that right bone into place. So now we have our root bones for the left and right of the hair. I'm going to right click on L hair 1's joint out here, still in the joint editor. Go to create, split bone, and there you'll see that it splits it and names it. So that's why I like that. It's kind of a drawn-out process to get you there to where you could see that. But that naming is so important. You put an L or an R in front of things and an underscore with a number after them anytime you're creating a chain. it'll make the creation of that chain so much easier. And you can see there too where the origin point and end point of that L hair bone were really, those are where I want my entire chain to flow. So as I create these child bones now, they will split. So now I have the second one here, and I hit create split bone. You'll see that it creates it right in line. So now I can go over to R hair 1, create split bone. We have our second one. Then right click again, create split bone, and there we have our third. Now I'm only going to go 3 joints deep in creating this hair. That's really all we need, I think. So now I'm going to select L hair 2. I'm going to make sure that my snaps are all turned back on, because that way my origin and end points will follow. And I'm just going to move the origin points of these, and the end point of the third joint. And then if I select L hair 1, right click, go to edit, mirror joints. This time I'm going to change this to selected recursive. And that will mirror that joint and all the joints in the chain. So now we can see that our left and right hair joints are all correct. So I'm going to turn off my snapping for a moment. That way I don't accidentally move anything around. And I'm going to hold the shift key and select all 6 of those joints in my scene tab. Then right click, memorize selected nodes rigging. So now whenever we restore the figure, if I were to grab all these joints and swing them, if I hit Control Shift F, that's the key command to restore a figure, then it will send those back to that original point where they were memorized. So now we have the joints for the left of the hair and for the right of the hair. Now we need to make the joints for the rear, the hair rear, and for the transmap hairs, or the translational hairs. Transitional hairs. Too many trans words. So now let's go to our left view, and we'll zoom in, hitting Control F. And looking at this, I actually think I want to alter again where my where these are at. I want to tweak that just a little bit. So let's go into Edit in the Joint Editor tool. We'll right click and go to Edit. We're going to turn on Propagate Translations, and this is really important because when you turn that on, now if I grab this joint and move it, the other joints downstream will follow. So I'm going to move that joint, okay? And because I want the front, I want this hair oriented more to the front, these joints oriented more to the front of the head. So I'm going to move this to where it's sitting kind of at the outer arc of the crown right there. You can see there how those joints kind of fall around the face. And then I will edit, right click and edit, hit mirror joints. We're going to mirror those. And then select all 6 of those joints, right click and memorize selected nodes rigging. So now those are more where I want them to sit for better movement later. So now I'll select the head, go into our left view, right click, create child bone. This is going to be rear hair. And again, I'm going to choose YZX for my rotation order. Hit accept. And I want to make sure that all my snaps are turned off at the moment. And let's just pull the root, or the origin point of that up to really kind of where all the hair converges at the top of the crown. Then I'm going to turn on auto align and pull the end point down to somewhere generally toward the end of where the hair is going to fall. And I do need to make sure that I have that named properly since we're going to do a chain here. So let's add an _1. And now that we have the naming corrected, I can right click and hit create split bone. Next we'll go down to hair 2, rear hair 2. Right click, create split bone. And I'm going to need to turn my auto snap endpoints back on. That's a right click, snap auto snap endpoints. And then let's just move these joints the rest of the way so that it kind of arcs around. Now we can shift select those 3 new joints, right click, memorize selected nodes rigging. So now that we have all those joints added in, and this is actually kind of a simpler, this is sort of a basic hair setup for using joints. You can go absolutely nuts doing this, and I encourage you to experiment with that and play around with it. There's lots of times where if I'm doing a hair kit, I might go through and add layers of bones. You know, I may do underside layers, topside layers, and separate that stuff out. You can get crazy granular with it. And I would encourage you to, because the deeper you go into adding joints into hair, the more options you have. So, you know, and I like to go really far with it. I'm not going to go that far here just because of the constraints of time. But what I am doing here is a great simpler setup for that. It's a more advanced setup than what I see in most hair out there, because you know most hair out there is not even using joints. This is giving you a nice system for using those joints and really a good starting point. And you can get really creative with how you set those up too. I mean, you could actually do you know sub chains off of these. So so say the front hair, you know, left front hair or L hair 1 could have chains that attach to it, so that when it moves, they move, but then they could move independently downstream from that. It's really, the sky's the limit, and that's kind of part of why I encourage experimentation, because you know, learn how to do this in this simple way, and then start thinking about, well, what if I added bones downstream from this? What if I want things to move in this way? Let's say you had a hairstyle where you created a braid coming down, and then that braid stops and you have a long dangling strips of hair coming out of that. Well, you could have one chain coming down for the braid, and then have that chain end in a set of other chains. When I say chains, I'm talking about joints. You could have that one chain come down, and then at the bottom of that have it break off into others that correspond to strips of hair, and just go crazy with all kinds of stuff with that. So it's very limitless what you can do with that. And one of the beautiful things of building hair in this way is at the point where you're using joints and rigging for your hair movement instead of morphs, the end user then can swing that around any way they want. They can take it anywhere. They're not limited to just the straight vectors that you give them with sculpted morphs. So it's just, I cannot stress how much of a superior method it really is in terms of the versatility and movement and all that kind of stuff. So from here, we need to start assigning the mesh polygon groups to correspond with each of these joints so that we can then select them in the viewport. So that's where we're going to go back to our group editor for the moment. And remember, I said earlier that we would eventually be changing these basic face groups that we put in place for left hair, right hair, and rear hair. Now is the point where we're going to be getting into that. And what we're going to do is hide everything except the section of the hair that we're going to work on. So let's start with the left hair. Okay, let's turn that on. And I'm going to go ahead into my face groups here and add an _1 to that. And then a little trick I like doing, because it speeds things up, I don't like typing, is I will select all but the number and hit copy in the naming there. So now I have everything else hidden. I'm going to right click and make sure that my selection mode is set to lasso. And Might also want to hide the G3 female underneath there. So now with a lasso selection, I'm going to come through and make a selection that leaves, that I can tell is going to leave where those hairs connect to the scalp unselected. And then we'll expand that up just a couple times. Maybe Alt click and deselect anything that might be grabbing the roots there. Then I'm going to right click, go to Geometry Assignment, create Face Group from Selected. Then remember I copied the name, all but the number, so I can just paste it. Now hit a 2. So there's our second group. And then I'm going to hold the Alt key and just drag around all of that to deselect anything that I don't want to be in my last group. This is just a good workflow practice to have when working with groups, is you can create like one large group that allows you to hide everything else, and then it makes it much easier and faster to go through and create new groups with these selections. So to right click, go to Geometry Assignment, create Face Group from Selected. Again, paste, and we have L hair 3. So now we have 3 poly groups here that correspond to our different joints. We'll go back into our joint editor, and I'll start from L hair 3, go into my selection group menu, and we'll just associate that one. Now L hair 2, we'll associate it, and L hair 1. So now we have groups associated with those, and that then means that we can right click in the viewport, make a selection, or we can just click and you'll see now the polygons are highlighted. So now we have polygons associated with our joints. So next, let's hide all of the left hair 1 or left hair sections. Turn on the right hair, rename it with an _1. Select all the characters in that name up to the number. Copy. And now we're going to repeat that whole process for the right side. So, and just a slightly different workflow method we could use is to select all of those polygons and right click, deselect the root areas. It's just a slight variation on how I did that the other group. And then I'm going to expand my group a couple of times just to be sure I've got enough associated with my my second hair joint. Then I'll right click, go to Geometry Assignment, create Face Group from Selected, paste, and add my number. Now we have our second right hair group. And now we're going to remove from that selection everything that we don't want be in the R hair 2 group. Do that a couple times. Then right click, go to Geometry Assignment, create Face Group from Selected, paste, and add a 3. So now we have our groups needed for the right hair chain. And we can now go in and associate those. So I'll go to R hair 3. And same process as before. Each of those in place. Now back to our geometry editor, and we will hide those. And we're going to do the same process with the rear hair. Add my _1. Copy. And this one might be a little trickier just because it has so much of the head around it, but even then, let's just go to a left view on this. And I will deselect, let's deselect all of that. Still got a lot more to deselect. There we go. I really want to make sure that I don't have any of the roots getting picked up in my second or third bones. Okay. So now I'll right click, go to geometry assignment, create face group from selected, paste, add my number. And then I will deselect everything that I don't want in my third group and repeat. Geometry assignment, create face group from selected, paste, and add a 3. So now we can go back to our joint editor. We'll go to R hair 3. Excuse me, rear hair 3. And associate mesh with those. 3, 2, and 1. Now back to our geometry editor. We're going to hide these. Now let's turn on our trans hairs for the moment. Go back to the head and create a joint for those. So we'll go back to our joint editor. And I'm going to turn off all my snapping just because I don't feel like having to restore the head bone again. Create, right click and create child bone. This is going to be transition hairs. And then YZX. And I'm only creating this joint really so that these hairs are easily hideable and selectable in the viewport if we want. I'm not really going to rig them at all. They're just going to follow the head, but I want them to have their own joint so that they can be selected and we can just turn them on and off, turn their visibility on and off very easily. So from there, let's just pull that joint up. And I'm actually paranoid. I want to make sure that I restore that head joint just to be sure. And those transition hairs, pull that back in, and we're going to memorize that joint's rigging. And then set that joint's face group, trans hairs. So now we can unhide all of our mesh and we can unhide our figure. And now you can see we have selectable groups for the hair in the viewport. Now at this point we don't have any skin weights attached to that hair. So I am going to save a copy of this. I've already finished out a version of this hair that I'm probably going to pull in and work with here shortly. But I wanted you to see this process up to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and save a copy of this as demonstration. And there it's going to save out all my assets. That way the work I've done so far isn't lost. I've actually gone ahead and worked ahead past this point. But just so that we have, this live version is documented anyway, and I can get back to it in case we need it. At this point, we're ready to add our skin weights. And I do want to make a slight correction. Remember, we saw that the scalp was not in the right place. The scalp had shrank a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just over here, back inside Zbrush, actually select our Genesis 3 female, and I'm going to send all of this back over to Zbrush. Give that just a moment. There we go. Okay, and once this comes over, I'll go back to my my hair, and This is going to be a little strange for just a moment. You notice when it comes in, you can't see the scalp in here. The reason for that is because ZBrush only shows polygons one-sided, and that's a good thing typically. It's not very often that you'll see me turn on display double-sided, but here we need to so that we can see the interior of this. So then we've got a lot of polygons in here, so I'm just going to deselect a bunch, hide a bunch of these, so that I can get in here and see just that scalp, and kind of get that poly count, the visible poly count down, so this is easier to work with. So now that I've drilled down to where I have some of the scalp that I can reach, now I can kind of invert that and see just the scalp. And so here I can see, now that I unsolo that, I can see my scalp against the figure, and I want to make sure there's nothing else showing. I'm going to hit project all, and that should snap that scalp right onto the underlying figure's base resolution mesh. And then from there, I'll go into deformation and just click the very center of inflate. Now if you click over here to the sides, anywhere you click on that, it's actually going to engage that command. So I want to click dead center so that the 0 is highlighted, and then just put a 1 in there. Hit that. So there you'll see that that inflated that out ever so slightly. That actually might be a bit much. So this is a neat little trick that I use a lot. Is I'll store a morph target of my original shape for something, and then I'll change it a little further than where I know I want, but then I can use that morph slider to go somewhere in between. And then we can make a couple more quick changes here. Let's turn on, let's see, we have symmetry turned on. Just a little bit of inflate on there so that we account for some of the body of hair laying close to the head. Now once I've made those changes, those little corrections, I'll unhide the rest of this. Turn off that display. Maybe give it a little bit of shape right here. There we go. Just that way I make sure those transitional hairs are showing. Actually, let's go ahead and polygroup this too so I can see it very clearly. There we go. I'll just pull that stuff out. Sometimes going back and forth between ZBrush and other programs, you'll have, I call it slippage or shrinkage. So you'll have little bits of mesh shrinkage sometimes before you land on your final piece. And every once in a while you have to make some little tweaks. It's not that bad. So now I'll send this back over through GoZ, update our base mesh, hit accept. Now you can see that's all in place and we are good to go. So now we can move on with the rest of this. So we just crossed the line to the 1 hour mark, which is usually when I like to take a short break, kind of catch my breath, because I know I'm pounding a lot of stuff in these seminars. So I'm going to grab a drink. You guys can take a second, chat amongst yourselves, stretch, grab a drink, hear the call of nature if you need to. And I will be back in just a couple minutes to lead us into the second hour of this, and we'll be doing some fun stuff with finishing up our rigging, doing weight mapping, and then we'll also be getting into showing you how to combine the rigged hair with sculpted morphs and all kinds of neat stuff with that. So I will be back in just a moment. All right, I am back, coffee in hand, and ready to move on with hour number 2. So before we get going, does anyone have any questions or comments on anything that you've seen so far? I know I am packing a lot in here, so turn that off. I know I'm packing a lot of stuff in here, so you know, if I happen to go over anything a little too quick or anything like that, you guys be sure to let me know. So I'm going to take just a moment and kind of watch the chat and see if anyone has any questions. It's a great time to pop that off. Chat seems on the quiet side, so I'm going to take that as everyone's kind of with me and we're ready to move on. So let's jump back in. So at this point, we have our groups, we have our joints, we need skin weights. That's like the next big thing that we need. And there's actually a really crazy easy way to make those happen. What I'm going to do is select L Hair 3, or any of them, it actually doesn't even matter, and go into my node weight map brush. And you'll see that initially we don't have any weight maps on any of these joints. The new joints that we created. Everything is locked into that head joint. But since we've created polygroups and associated them with those joints, that opens us up to a really nifty little trick. So let's select a joint, and with our node weight map brush, I'm going to right click, go down to weight editing, and hit fill by bone selection groups. And as soon as I do that, you'll see that now we have each of those groups are 100% weighted to the joint that they're associated with. Since the scalp was associated with the head, it's now weighted to the head joint, so on. So that's so handy. I can't stress how handy that is. That's such a great thing. So now I'm going to go into my group editor, geometry editor, I should say, and just hide my scalp and trans hairs because I'm not going to need to edit anything about either of those. And let's just go to L Hair 1 for the moment. And actually, I got a step ahead of myself. I'm going to hide everything except my left hair pieces. Okay. So we have just the left hair showing. And then I'm going to select L Hair 3, and we'll right click. And just so you know, inside the node weight map brush, you have a basic version of the geometry editor inside that brush where you can right click and do some geometry selecting. So let's select all of our geometry there, and then from L Hair 3, I will right click, go to weight editing, and smooth selected. And you can play around with different settings in there. I stay around 40% in 19 or 20 iterations. And I can see that there's some of these hairs that didn't quite get associated. That's okay. Right now we've just smoothed this out a bit. And I'm going to come back over and gently paint in some weight. And you'll notice that when you're working with hair meshes like this, these are very dense meshes. So actually painting, when you go to paint a stroke over them with the node weight map brush, it's going to be really slow. So I try to not do that unless I have to. So let's grab L Hair 2, and I am going to add just a slight stroke through the middle. Let's turn the weight of our weight map brush up a bit. Okay. So in smoothing the weight maps out, that gave us some nice distribution of weight throughout the strands. And then we could go in and just kind of manually tweak this out a little bit more. Now let's go to L Hair 1. And I want to make sure that that I have the root areas of these strands, especially the ones at the top. Those are kind of the most obvious. That I have the root areas of those strands very much part of L hair 1 for now. That's going to change in just a moment. And we'll just do a little bit of smoothing. I'm holding the control key as I paint. Smooth over that. And just be patient with that brush when you're working with hair meshes because they are dense and it slows things down quite a bit. So the next thing I want to do is just a little tweak, but it's sometimes the little touches that make things really worthwhile. I'm going to select all 3 of those hair joints and then use my rotational tool out here, my little gizmo in the viewport, rotate those, and we'll see how they start to move. Now I can tell just watching that, that I have root areas of hair that need to be bound to the head again. So once I've rotated these out, though, that moves all that mesh, so it becomes really easy to make selections. So we can just go back to our geometry editor and we can drag selections around like that. Or we could just grab L hair 3 and then expand our selection up a few times. It's actually, this is kind of a chaotic sort of set of mesh. So I'm just going to drag a selection around where I know my roots are, like that. And might have to do it from a couple different angles. And now, back in my node weight map brush, I'll select the head joint, which now we can see there's no weights associated there. And I'm going to right click, go to weight editing, fill selected with 100%. So now those are completely bound to the head. So let's invert our selection and then expand the selection once. We may end up, depending on how tight the selection was, we may have to come back through and tweak a little bit of that just to kind of get rid of some roots, because we're going to smooth this out just a bit. So, but there's the kind of selection you eventually want to have. And so now on L hair 2, I'll just hold control, stroke through there with my node weight map brush. Let's just expand that up a little bit. It's a really subtle effect, but this is going to help us get all of these hairs kind of, we want to make sure that those roots are in place, that those are where they need to, that they stay where they need to stay, but we still want to make sure we have plenty of influence throughout our bones. So this is where it gets a little finicky. It's a little almost artsy, because this is where it's a lot of just making choices and painting and kind of playing around with stuff. And a little bit more smoothing per bone. And do a little bit more. I want to be careful, but how much I do under the underside there. And it's interesting too, you can also help maintain the volume of your hair during movement by how much influence you give on the underside of it to these joints. So for instance, if I'm swinging around here and I want some of this stuff under here to stay a little more rooted around the ear, I might dial my sensitivity down, and from L hair 1, kind of gently stroke right around that area. And you'll see that it starts to bring that back in. Or I could even select the head, and the weight that I give to the head is basically, it's influence. It's influencing those hairs. And so you can see as we paint that in, we start to retrieve some of our volume. So if I were to go back to my geometry editor now, and let's change our selection mode to drag selection. Now, I could go through and just paint over that much. I could just paint over some of these. And of course, this responds to what's visible, so it's looking straight forward from your camera. So now you can see I have this selection made from the underside of those hairs. And now if I take that and go to the head joint, and let's make this brush really large. Let's make this like 120. Okay. So now, as I paint into that group, I'm making the head joint have a little more influence over this underside. So the hair joints all still influence it, but you can see that as I add influence back to the head joint, it's almost as if it's filling volume back out. So now when this hair moves, we won't be losing volume. So I think that's one of the things that when people do morphs with hair, this is where the look gets, the illusion totally gets broken, is because a lot of times when they do these morphs, the whole thing will move, or they'll have things pulling away from the scalp and it loses volume. There's all kinds of stuff that's just like, please stop. Please make it stop. So let's select the rest of this and do just a little bit of smoothing from the head joint. And that's going to help kind of work all that out. So again, we're trying to maintain volume. And I think that is good. So now let's take a look at all three of these hair joints selected. Store the figure. So here we can see, here's our default position. And if I grab, actually, let's do this per rotation. Go into our parameters, and I'll just select all three of these. And if we go to Y rotation now, you can see how those move. The Z rotate's really the one that's going to show us a lot. Okay, so take that out to about there. And then, of course, we don't even have subdivision turned on this yet. When we turn subdivision on, those are going to smooth out even more, and it's going to be really, really cool. So it's going to be great. It's going to be great hair. We're going to make the best hair. This hair is going to be huge. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So we need to repeat that process for the rest of the hair. So, and that'll go much quicker since, I've explained it here, so you're going to see it now. I'm not going to step by step it quite so much because I want to press on through the remainder of this because we've got a few things left. About 40 minutes left in the presentation today, so I want to make sure that I get on through really the rest of the process. So let's hide those and show these. So here we're going to show the right hand hairs, and just going to repeat this process. Let's move these a little bit. I find that moving them a little bit really does give me a lot more room to work. Lets me see what I'm doing. And here you can see if we move those, we're going to have some strange stuff happen because we haven't smoothed these out at all yet. So let's go to our hair 3, right click, smooth selected. Oh, forgot I have to have it all selected. Geometry selection. So right click, go to geometry selection, select all. And then weight editing, smooth selected. So I like to start with just a basic smooth command over it. So there you can see that immediately got us much closer to what we're looking for. So let's go to hair number 2, L hair 2. Turn the weight up on that a little bit. Add some influence through the center. And then let's go to our hair 1. I'm going to hide my G3 female for the moment so that I can see this a little more plainly. A little bit of skin weight painting. Promise this doesn't hurt. Won't hurt a bit. Okay. And I'm going to hold control and just kind of stroke over the rest of this hair so that we smooth those weights out all the way through, or most of the way through. And let's do another smooth one more time, just so we know we've got nice even weighting. Okay. One more time. You notice I don't really stroke over the first or third joints that much. It's mostly just the second one. And then the last step was to make sure that we get the roots back in place, rooted down to the head. So let's just grab three. Let's see if we can get a little closer with that. Big thing here is just you want to make sure that you get those root areas. And you know, a little trick that you can also do that I actually probably should have done on this, it's not entirely necessary, but it's handy, is you know, we could have actually done some preliminary grouping in another program and grouped just the polys at the root level so to make those even easier to select. Not entirely necessary, but you know, if I had to do it over, I'd at least think about doing that. So now I have those roots selected and the head joint selected, we'll go back to the node weight map brush, right click, go to weight editing, and fill selected. Then I'm going to invert that selection and come back here, invert that selection and smooth it. And back over here, a little bit more on that first hair joint. There we go. And most of the process from here is just a little bit of smoothing, a little more weight. The most noticeable point for those root weights is going to be down the part in the hair and around the front. So just kind of take special note of those areas. The funny thing about hair is that hair is actually kind of forgiving. Because it is so chaotic, you can get away with a lot. There's a lot of neat stuff that you can do, but and also a lot that you can get away with. So now let's just walk through the second joint. A little bit more on that one. It's all about that gradient. That's really what drives everything in this kind of movement, is having a nice smooth gradient there across these joints. That way it feels like it really flows. And then let's just kind of zoom way out with a really low value. And we'll walk back around the underside of this grab some of these hairs around the underside, and now we'll fluff out that volume a little bit by adding some of this weight back to the head joint. And the inverse is also true. Like if I inverted that group and I went through and removed weight from the head joint, then you would see it move further away from the head, further away from the body, and kind of the opposite effect. So going back and forth between those, we can really tweak out our volume quite a bit. I do see this guy. For some reason, this hair strand, these couple of strands right here are bugging me. I'm just going to select those by themselves and make them follow a little more closely what I had in mind there. There we go. Now let's look at these three joints. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. Now we can restore that, and now we can move on to the rear joints. Okay, so let's open up those three rear groups. I think this time I'll just start off with hammering that first group right to the head. With 100% selection on that. And I reduced that just a little bit, reduced my selection, and I'm going to weight the lower half of that group now to rear hair 1. Sometimes I'll reach over and turn off respect selection when I need to just paint something broadly on across a shape. Now let's turn the rest of these back on. Add these other selections. And let's just select all. Smooth. Give that just a moment. The rear hair is going to be tough because it is so dense. It's got a lot going on. Sure that I have pretty even influence throughout. Just a moment. Okay. And let's look at hair 3. And we can give that a little smoothing. It's a lot of back and forth on this kind of thing. Most of this stuff I find is, like one of the things that kind of messes with people a little bit is, I think a lot of times folks are like, how do I do this? And they want to say, okay, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this. But in a lot of the stuff that we do, it's like any kind of artwork. There are steps, but there's a lot of side steps, and there's a lot of routes to get to the same ending. And there's times when you'll take 2 steps forward, or, take 2 steps back to take another step forward, and vice versa. You get my meaning. So most of what we do with this kind of work is not very cut and dried at all. So that's why I try to show this stuff to you guys in a way that really embraces broad techniques and applications more than step-by-step instruction, because I feel like, step-by-step is going to show you how to do a specific thing. Like there's an infinite number of hairs that we could make, and if I show you step-by-step, here's how to make this hair, well, that's probably the only hair you're really going to pick up out of it, because I'm not dealing with it conceptually. So I feel like that's kind of a big thing, to try and show. I hope that I'm able to convey that to you guys in the course of this, because if you get the concepts, then it'll make so much more sense when you try to do other projects and do things for yourselves. So here we have, looks like our skin weights are just about done on this. I'm probably going to need to go through and weight some stuff back to the head one more time. Yeah, there I can see those roots on the inside. I'm going to need to weight those a little bit more. It's a process. Probably weighting those just a little bit too much, actually. But I'd rather have the roots weighted too much than not enough. Grab hair one, a little bit more weighting in it. And getting pretty close here. Take one more trip around your hair too. Much. That wasn't quite enough. Right. And the last thing I want to do, rotate all of these a bit, see where I lose volume, and go back to that head group, and very gently do a little painting on the underside here. That way, as it swings around, we maintain volume. Okay, there we go. Nice. So now let's show all of our groups. And then this is just kind of a neat little way to demonstrate. If I select all those hair joints, we can swing all those around together. Of course, it's going to look like crap for a second there, but you get the point. You can see the kind of movement that you get. So we need to set some limits on movement. So I'm going to take, I'll do these per chain. I could do all 9 of these joints at once, but I'm only going to do them 3 at a time. So let's go to our rear hair joints. Select all 3 of those in the parameters. So I've selected those, the joints themselves in the scene, and then in parameters I can click on all of them And we'll go to the X rotate. And let's just move all of that. And let's say we're going to give on X a minimum rotation of, let's say, like negative 30, and a max, right now we're at 50, so let's say 65, just so we have some room to play there. Okay. And then Y rotation is going to be our twisting, so I'm going to keep that at about negative 30 and 30. And then Z rotation, take side to side. And let's take that one to negative 50 and 50. And then on the left here and right here, a lot of those numbers are going to be the same. So let's look at our Y rotation, and I think I'm going to go 30 and 30 on those. And the nice thing is we have all those selected and you hit the little gear here, then we can edit all those parameters at once. I love that. That's so handy. After literally like almost 20 years, almost 2 solid decades of having to do everything either in text editors or piece by piece by piece in Poser, being able to work like this is just, it's so cool. So there now we've locked the Y rotation on all those to negative 30 and 30. Now let's look at X rotation. So let's do negative, pardon me. So negative 75 and 75. Those are just broad stroke numbers. We could go through and get very specific with them if we wanted. Actually, going back on these, I'll probably, let's just change those to 20 on the positive side. And 75 is probably a bit much there, actually. Let's take that and go, let's stop at 50. So negative 50. No, not negative 5. I wanted a 50. There we go. And see, there you can see, even because of the way that we paid attention to our volume and the way we did the weight mapping, now as that rotates, most of those root areas stay intact. So you get that nice rotational, flowing, volumetric sort of hair movement. It's much, much more successful than straight morphs. So we're almost done with the rigging aspect of this. Then there's the next big thing is going to be combining rigging with morphs. And that's when we just, the doors just come wide open, and it's amazing where we can go with it. So we have all our limits set. Did I forget anything? No. I think we have Z rotations to do. Yeah, Z rotations on those need to be set. So let's do negative, let's see, negative 50 and 50. Of course, the left front isn't going to go negative 50 on that. Let's take the left front, or the left hairs, and go, let's see, L hair 3, 2, 1. Let's take those and lock that negative to, say, negative 10. And then that means the inverse will be true for the right hair. So R hair 3, R hair 2. And so on that one, we're going to lock positive to a 10. Now if we grab all of these, so now you can see how that kind of stops close to the face. There's going to be a little intersection there, but that's okay because we can we have all these rotations and we can pull stuff around. You know, there you can see how that's going to work out. And so just there in the use of those rotational controls, you know, we already have gotten a shape out of this hair that normally would have been done with like one sculpted dial or a combination of them, but we can alter this and do all kinds of cool stuff with it that you just can't do with a straight morph. So let's make sure I save this. And I'll make these other groups visible here. Some of this will actually make a little more sense when you can see it this way. And as I move things around, if as I'm moving I see something that seems a little off, like right here on, I think it's our hair 1 is going to give me a little bit of grief. I can see where this strand, okay, is kind of breaking through. And this is where we get into some really granular sort of editing. I hadn't planned on doing much of this here, and I think I'm only going to need to do it with maybe that one strand. Maybe a few I can see right in here. Okay, let's grab some of these guys. And if we right-click with the geometry editor, go to geometry visibility, and hit hide unselected, then we can see these. Okay? And let's just select those guys there all again. And then I want to make sure that I route these to the head. No. And just a little smoothing. Of course, this strand is not actually even touching the head there, and it's really emanating out from where those trans hairs are. You can see that. Those are so handy for that. Now let's just move all of this around. I still might want to go back in at some point and tweak the shape of my scalp just a little bit more so it covers a little more area. But there you can see with all those joints and everything in place. So at this point we need to name our rotations on all of our hair joints. And I'm just going to select all those bones and do these all at once. So let's grab X rotate, and for all of them that is going to be, I'm going to call that front to back. Then Z rotate, I'm going to grab that, and that's going to be side to side. And Y rotate is going to be twist. Okay. So now we have our naming. And another interesting thing about rigging hair like this, we could choose to leave our translations available. Now, I know some people like those hidden, some people don't get a little weird about it, but I like being able to grab that translation tool and actually add some stretch and bounce to the hair that way. So in the end, as an end product, I'll probably have those hidden, but I'll wait to hide those until I'm finished because of where we're going to go next. Now the next thing we're going to do is making some things that will look to you guys like morphs. They're going to look like morph dials. They're going to act like morph dials to a certain degree because it's going to be a named shape. But that named shape is really just, the named dial is going to drive some rotations. So let's go in and let's set up a blown left shape. So the way that we'll do that is we'll select our joints here. So let's just do the front for now. Okay. And we'll select all those joints. And let's go side to side. Like that. And then maybe add a little front to back so that we can see the strands kind of come out in front of the face a little more. And then we can come in and add some tweakage to that, a little bit more shaping. This is where it actually, to me, this is actually the fun part of working with hair, is once you have it all rigged up, and then you're starting to play around with shapes and creating, you know, these preset movements. So let's just let's open this up a little bit. Now you can see we've got all that movement put in place. And right here is a great example of why I like to keep those translations available at this stage. Is like right here, I have a little bit of intersection with the collar, so I can just grab a rotate or a translate tool and move that stuff manually like that. So now we have all that movement in place. From there, it becomes really easy to kind of bake that movement. What we're going to do is go to our the root, go to our actual hair object, the root of the object, and then I'm going to right click, make sure that I'm in parameters and edit mode, and then I'm going to right click and there we go, edit mode, right click, create new property, and I'm going to name this blown left, and under path I'm going to there's some debate on this as to what is considered standard, because these aren't actually morphs. These are more like posing controls that you find on the root of the G3 figures. I prefer having the path on these be pose controls. Some people prefer having it be like morphs and prefer the presentation to be set as morphs. I will leave that up to you guys and whatever you decide. I don't think there even should be a standard for that, honestly, because it really should be up to how the creator of the piece wants it to work, how the intended usage is really what I believe that should be. So that's kind of a hard thing for me to say. My preference is that I would put these under pose controls. But since a lot of folks think of hair as morphs, and it's a debate. It really is a debate to be had. From my personal approach, they're pose controls. But a lot of folks will see these as morphs, and they'll say, "Why are there morphs in the pose controls?" Even though they're not morphs, drives me nuts. Drives me absolutely nuts. So just for the sake of, I don't know, let's put them in under morphs for now. Let's say actor, and then we'll put this under. We'll say hair movement. That might be a nice way to strike a balance there. And then under presentation attributes, this is where that debate really gets into the nitty-gritty of it, is that the presentation attributes are really important, because if I save this as a pose type, then I can save poses for this hair and just save them as normal poses, and they'll work. If I save it as shape, then anytime I want to save a pose for this hair, I actually have to save it as a shape setting. And I find that kind of odd. So that's just me. since I'm putting it under actor, if you put it under actor, make sure it's a shape. That seems to be kind of a thing. So I'm going to put it there under actor, leave it under shape. Then I'm going to set my minimum to 0, my max to 1, hit create. So now I have my group here called hair movement that was made when I put that in. I'm going to drag this dial, pull that up, right click, hit ERC freeze, and you're going to see a ton of stuff show up in here. Just an absolute ton of stuff. Anything that is labeled with a normal body part, make sure that you shift select all that and then right click and toggle that stuff off. None of that needs to be on. The only things that you want picked up by this dial are going to be labeled hair. So you want all that hair stuff to get picked up though. So now I'll hit accept. Now if I restore my figure, boom, there we go. Not a morph, because you can see it's moving rotationally. But to the end user, the functionality is just like a morph. So that's how we would create, some basic movements. So let's do another one, kind of similar. Here's another bit of functionality that I like. Like if I'm going to change this momentarily to change the presentation on this from shape over to pose. If I change that to pose, hit accept, then if I hit Shift B when I have that turned up, if I hit Shift B, that's going to bring up my baked transforms menu. And this is kind of something that I really dig. If I have that set to presentation and I bring up baked to transforms, and then I set this to root, recursive, and I just leave these unchecked so that anything that's listed as a pose control is going to get baked. Now, any rotations, anything that's linked to that, when I hit accept, see how all that stuff stays in place, right? And this dial now went to 0. That's because what that did is it looked at the values driven in those joints by this dial and set them and turned the dial off. That's what baked transforms does. And the neat thing here that allows us to do, since we have symmetrical joints, is now I can hit Shift Y and swap left and right. And now that shape is basically swapped. I mean, there's some little differences that are going to happen just because of the chaos that is the shaping and skin weights of hair. But still, being able to do that really gives us a huge, huge advantage. A nice, fast way to work on creating more of those baked-in shapes. Now we'll just tweak those out a little tiny bit. And again, let's go back to our root, and we're going to create a new property, blown right, and we'll put that under. Now that we've created that group, we can get it through the drop down here. Call that hair movement. I'm going to set this to 0, and for the moment, I'm going to keep this stuff in my presentation set to pose. I think we'll just change that at the very end. Okay, so now I'll turn up blown right, right click, go to ERC freeze, and this time it's not bringing up, since we've actually restored the G3 figure with that first ERC freeze command. Now when we bring this up, the only hair shows up. Now we can hit accept, restore the figure. Now we have blown right. And then if we want a dial for doing both blown left and blown right, call it blown side to side, we'll right click and create a new property. We're going to call this blown side to side. We'll tuck that into our hair movement path. Set this to pose type. We're going to leave this one -1 to 1. That way -1 will go to the right, 1 will go to the left. So we'll hit create. Now if I drag this to the left, this up, right click, ERC freeze. And now restore, send it to the right, bring this one up. And then ERC freeze. So now we have the ability to swing left to right. And you'll see instead of moving straight vectors, we're rotating. So right there, that alone, getting that kind of movement out of morph-based hair is not going to happen. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not, but it would take at least half a dozen or more morph shapes all linked up and driven in some crazy ways to get that kind of movement. Whereas this just swings. It just swings and flows, and there you go. So those are going to be my basic movements most of the time on a hair piece. There's going to be blown left, blown right, then blown front to back. So we can go in and do those real quick. Let's do, go in, select. Actually, I'm going to use these. I wanted to show you guys another technique. I wanted to get to the point where I'm showing you how to combine morph rotations with sculpting. So, and this is an important and nifty thing. So now that I've shown you how to rig the hair, how to do the skin weights, how to set up these controllers, the next thing we're going to get into, and this is a great opportunity for it, I'm going to do my blown front to back, but I'm also going to incorporate some object level sculpting in that. So let's pop back over to Zbrush, and then I'm going to go back to my original tool set right here, where I had everything separated, where I have all those separate subtools, okay? And I'm going to go down, turn on my G3 female in here so I can see them. So let's go to hair rear, and I'm going to delete any morph targets I have on there at the moment and store one so I can get back to my original shape for that group. And then let's take this is one of the few times you'll see me use the groomer brushes. I don't really use them that often. Let's take Groom Hair Toss, turn its Z-add down really low, and we'll just kind of drag that out. Pardon me. Now we're going to get a little bit of per strand movement because of the way that we're going to use these. This is going to figure into a blowback shape. It's not just going to be a blowback morph though, because I'm going to show you how to have Daz Studio look at a morph and then bake joint rotations in that complement that morph so that they end up working together. Okay, so here we've worked on that subtool. Now let's go to our front left. We're going to grab that one and just brush it out, back. And really this is kind of the extent of what most people seem to do for their hair morphs and shapes. And it's fine. I mean, it has its place, but you know, if you were to move, oh, sorry, I forgot to delete and store morph target. Back pedal, back pedal, back pedal. There we go, back pedal. So if I store a morph target there, now I pull this back. If you were just doing this as a straight up morph, right, this shape, well, if I drag this, you can see right here, that's moving in a straight line. And it really shouldn't, because you can see it passes through things where it gets to its end result. It's just, there's all kinds of issues with that. So we're going to combine sculpted shape with joint rotation, so those things complement each other and you get a much more natural sort of movement. Pull that a little bit, that. and then from the front. There we go. And we could get as granular as you like with the shape of this. It really doesn't matter. Let's go to our group to the right. And again, I want to delete my morph target and restore a morph target so I can get back to my initial shape. And so there I have the general shape that I'm going to want, pretty close, for this blown back. Front just a little bit more. Move back a bit so that it's tapering on around. Sometimes you're better off just to grab the move brush. I want to look at the left again just a little bit. Bear with me, folks. There's a little bit of magic about to happen, hopefully. Wouldn't be the first time something's went sideways on me doing these things, but we'll see. Hopefully this should work out. All right. So once I have all of that shaping generally in place, I want to look over it and make sure that I have, I don't have any weird bare spots showing or anything like that. You pull stuff out a little bit, maybe even hit it with an inflate brush just to kind of fluff it out a little bit more. Okay. So now I'm going to hide my G3 female. I go back to my scalp. And remember earlier when I was talking about initially when we exported our OBJ for all this hair, how we merged all of it together. Well, we're going to use that again. We're going to merge visible because in merging visible, it's going to keep the same vertex count, same vertex indices needed for that to match up and become a morph. So even though these are separated in here, now when we merge visible, okay, we should have this guy right here, which should give us the same poly count, okay, 100,903, 100,903. You can always double check that way. So now from here, if I send this over to DS via GoZ, it's going to give me this import options, so I can hit update an existing object since it matches. That's the one that we want. I'll hit accept. And so now we have our regular GoZ update options pops up, and I'm going to type in here blown back, and then under property group I'm going to choose actor hair movement and hit accept. I'll give that just a minute because it's a lot of polygons, it's a lot of vertices for it to bring that to bring over into DS from GoZ. Okay, so when I dial this up, you're gonna, it might look like, oh, well, it's good, yay, there's my shape. Yeah, the shape is there, but it's moving in a straight vector. So now we want to integrate our rigging in with that. And like right now, if I were to click on a piece of that hair and try to use my rigging to move it, you'll notice that the mesh has moved, but the rigging hasn't. That's because morphs are per vertex. They're inside object space. Rigging is not. So we need to combine those things together so that DS will move the rigging with the morph and vice versa so that we get this kind of enhanced movement. Now that's really kind of the jewel, in my opinion, of this entire process that I'm teaching today. So the next thing we need to do then is once we have this morph dialed up, we're going to go to our joint editor, and then we're going to right click and go to edit, adjust rigging to shape. But we could do this manually, just moving the joints around, moving their origin points around, but DS actually tends to do a pretty good job of this itself. So once we go adjust rigging to shape, I'm going to right click and uncheck all, and then I can click on my hair joints. Those are the only ones that I want. Just shift select all of those, and then check selected, and then I'm going to deselect over here anything that's not hair, and we'll hit accept. Give that just a moment. Oh, I forgot to turn on adjust rotation, so I probably need to fix that. So we'll give that just a second. I'm going to have to run that again and turn on adjust rotations or orientations. That way it actually rotates the joints as well as moves their origins. So let's do that one more time. We'll right click, edit, adjust rigging to shape, uncheck all, select our hair joints, check selected, turn off everything over here that we don't need, and I want to make sure I have adjust orientation turned on, accept. What this is going to do, it's going to locally move all of those joints basically following the bounding boxes of those poly meshes, those polygon groups that we have associated with the joints. So now, once those are moved, sometimes it can do some strange stuff. So like our hair 1, it looks like it moved the endpoint of that kind of strangely. So you want to take a quick look around and make sure that those joints all kind of make sense visually. If they don't, one of the things I'll do is right click and I'll select a joint, right click, go to align and hit align node. And that one looks like, okay, I need to snap the endpoint on that. So we'll right click, go snap, snap endpoint, and then we'll align it. Now it's going to point back with a chain the way it should. And then here is L hair 3. I want the endpoint of that to be oriented back rear. So I'll just move that endpoint, and then we're going to align that node. So now you can see all those hair joints have moved to kind of follow roughly the shape that that morph is driving. So once we have all of those joints moved, we can select our hair. We see our morph is still turned on. We'll right click, hit ERC freeze, and now inside that freeze command we should see all these values for where DS has moved and reoriented those joints follow that shape. So now when I hit accept, it's going to bake all of that rotation to this dial. So now we've combined a morph, sculpted morph shape out of multiple subtools in Zbrush with joint rotations here in DS. So now you can see when I pull that up, it's actually going to move with rotation. So then I'm not stuck with just the beginning or ending of that morph or some straight vector in the middle. I can stop in the middle of the values for that and still use these other rotations, and it all plays together really nicely. You see, the reason that it is able to work together and all those things will work together so seamlessly is because we're using joint rotations. And then the morph sculpting is just a little extra aesthetic on top of those rotational controls. So that is really the kind of the goal. That is the end point. We want to get all of this rigging in place where we then have all of these tools in our rig that we can use in this way to be able to generate that kind of movement. So now, let's save this. And we could repeat that process. Okay? So I'm going to make this asset available to you guys. We were saying we can switch back to our original shape, delete the morph target, store it, switch, delete morph target, store it. Again, switch, delete morph target, and store it. So the last example I'm going to show you for combining morphs and rigging together is going to have more of a focus on style, creating a hairstyle from this stuff and not just a movement. We can bake all this stuff together, and it's really handy that way. Same process as before. Okay, let's do something really radical with this. Let's take our front left and let's just cut this hair. Right? Let's give it a full haircut. Something up relatively short. Okay. This is really neat. Okay, you're about to see some serious flexibility come out of this. Let's do something. I'm not sure what I would call this kind of an approach, but then let's cut the right hairs. And when I say cut, I'm really just holding Shift and smoothing over the hairs. Okay. Then we're going to cut over those. That. And move them around. And now let's take the rear hairs. We have symmetry turned on, and we're going to essentially cut those as well. Just smoothing that on back. And then let's just give that a little bit of shape. Like so. Turn on our G3 female so we can see what we've got. That's kind of cute. Just a quick, cute little shape. You see how quickly I generated this too, you know. I mean, I'm just shaping and moving, cutting these strands around. So let's make sure we have our transitions are on, our scalp is on. So now let's turn off our G3 female. We're going to go to scalp. And again, we're going to merge visible. And that's going to give us another new tool created out here. Okay. And just make sure you guys are awake. Somebody give me something to call this. Somebody tell me what I should call a little style like this. What would you call this? Any ladies who are present, anybody who knows hair, what would you call this kind of a hairstyle? Let me give this just a second while I grab a drink of coffee. Somebody? Anybody? Somebody give me a name for this. I'm horrible at naming hairstyles. Nothing? Nothing? Oh, I think you guys have fallen asleep on me today. Short flip. Thank you, Miss V. Somebody's awake out there. Thank you. All right, Miss V says short flip. So I'm going to call this short flip. And I'm just going to go-Z it. And again, since it's a new object over there, it'll have to be re-linked. That's okay. When it comes over, we'll hit update an existing object. I'll hit accept. Then let's name this short flip. And just cause I'm going to call this Miss V's short flip. There you go, Miss V. That's for you. And then we're going to tuck that under hair movement. Hit accept. Give it a second. And baking, and we have a cake. Okay. And so now we'll turn this up. There it is. And just as before, I'm going to go into my joint editor, right click, go to edit, just rigging the shape, uncheck all, and then I'm going to select just my hair joints, check select, turn off what we don't need, turn on adjust orientation, hit accept. And give that just a moment. Calculating. And okay, cool. There we go. Now let's see which joint this is that it sent off into La La Land. Okay, cool. Yep, our hair one seems to be the one that it likes to freak out with a little bit. So that's okay. When you right click, we'll go snap endpoint. And then we're going to right click again and hit align node. Now that joint should be aligned. And let's grab hair number 2, align node, hair number 3, node. Sometimes you have to go through and do that. Let's snap its center point, snap its end point. I like to make sure that these joints are all snapped at this, at this stage. So L hair 1, L hair 3. We're going to move its end point. Let's go right here with it, and we will align it. You just want that stuff to generally kind of make some kind of sense, So let's see. Oh, lost my selection there. Grab L hair 3. I want L hair 2. Grab 3. I'm just going to manually tweak some of this stuff. So line 2. Snap its endpoint and align it. There we go. And the rear is fine. The rear hairs are fine. So now that we have all of our joints aligned where we want them, we're going to right click, select the hair itself, still have our morph turned up. Now we can right click, ERC freeze. And we have nothing but hair joints showing up there. Now we hit accept. So now, when we dial that up, we get that shape. But we also get all that nice intermediary movement from the way the bones contract and rotate. And then on top of that, since it's rotational, these other controls will tend to work pretty well. So there you have some really highly functional hair. Great deal of functionality in that. What's really nifty out of that is you could take the asset that I'm going to give you guys with the Zbrush file of this. You could take that asset, generate these shapes all day long. Follow the steps I just showed for how to link them up with the joints, and you could make your own add-ons for this hair very, very quickly and easily. The other aspect of that, let's go ahead and save this. Okay, the other aspect of that, of doing add-ons for something like this, is going to be textures. And the textures are really the last thing that I want to apply to this before I call it a day. And I'm actually running over. I'm about 20 minutes over my usual time, but I want to make sure that I get this last little bit in here. So the last thing that I had to do on this piece was going to be the texturing of the scalp. So let's pop over here and knock out that scalp texture real quick, and then we'll be able to apply our textures, save that out, turn on smoothing, and we'll have a finished hairpiece. So go into my scalp, and I'm going to start off with some creasing around the edges. That way when I subdivide, it holds its shape. And then I'm going to subdivide that up to 7 subdivisions. And then flood it with black. And let's change our background gradient a little bit so that I can see a little more clearly. And then from there, I'm going to bring in a texture. Oh, what do we want to use here? That was unfortunate. That's what I get for trying to slip through there quickly. Alright, so let's go in here. You'll see that we actually have some colors already saved. And so I'm going to start off with just using a gray texture, and then I'm going to use my thinner transmap here. So what I'll do is I'll load this texture into my color, and then let's take that transmap, push it over into alpha. There we go. So now we have a color and an alpha. Turn off the Z-add, turn on RGB, and so now you can see we're able to paint with that texture and alpha. Very handy. So I'll turn on symmetry and work my way around the extremities, around the edges. Okay, like that. Make our brush a little bit bigger. That way we're just getting that outermost transmap for the scalp. And this is going to be both, it's really going to be the a texture that we can shove colors into with shaders, but then we can also use it as a transmap if we want. So now let's just come in. Once you have your brush set up like this, which I think I might actually save this brush and we'll include that as part of what we're giving away with this. Once you have your brush set up, then we can just paint and really have at it. So then let's take from the crown here, I still have symmetry turned on. Let's do a little bit like this. We'll leave a little bit of transparency in place, coming down the middle, just you know, so that we're kind of emulating some hair flow there. We're probably never going to actually see this part that clearly because of all the hair stacked on top of it, but you still want to give it a little bit of attention just in how it flows. So, and then let's just kind of work our way on down here. I like to get a little more sparse, a little bigger brush, a little more sparse as we get closer to the front. And I'm going to back up just a little bit. It looks like I kind of overshot there at one point. Of course, we can drag real slow. That way we can be a little more accurate with where the stroke stops. Blend that in a little bit. Oop. Turn on dynamic. That'll help us prevent that brush from changing size on us. Keep it nice and relative to the actual model. So that right there is going to give us a pretty decent transmap that we can use. I think I'm going to come in and tighten up down the center just a little tiny bit. Okay. And then turn off my symmetry and give it a little bit of chaos. So let's save this brush. So that's one more asset you guys will have available soon. And now set my UVs to 4096. UV map size to 4096. And then we'll hit new from polypaint. So now you'll see that's baked into a texture map. And then we can clone that, and I will export it. And this is going to be CGB flowing hair scalp TXTR. Awesome. Awesome. And since that's a grayscale map like that, that will receive color from the underlying color channel really, really well. We could actually do a lot to make that match up with our other textures inside BS. So the next thing that we need to do is actually push this to where it's more of a trans map, so we get a little more opacity out of some areas. And I'll do that inside Photoshop. So let's pop over and open this up in Photoshop. Just a second. All right. So once I'm in here, I'm going to auto level this. Control-Shift-L. Actually, I think I'm going to auto level it and keep that as my default on it, because I really like that. It's going to give us a little broader range of color when we apply colors on it. And then from there, I'll take I believe it's the Dodge tool. I always get them mixed up. Yeah, the Dodge tool. Take the Dodge tool, not the Ford or Chevy tool, the Dodge. Yeah, that was a horrible joke. Take the Dodge tool, and I'll use that rather than like running levels or contrast. I'd rather use this. That way I could paint with it, and I'll keep a much more natural flow into the transmapped areas at the edges. So now let's save that. Okay. Close up Photoshop. And now in Daz Studio, we can apply our materials. And this is a good point for me to show you the little trick that I mentioned earlier about randomizing materials. I know that was like 2.5 hours ago, but it's a really good trick, and this is kind of, we're almost at the very end of this. So I wanted to make sure I show you that so you can see just how that works. So what we're going to do is open our geometry editor, and I'm not going to work with the face groups. I'm going to work from surfaces now. So we can hide all of these surfaces. Let's grab L hair strands, and my selection mode is drag selection. So I'm going to start off just brushing across one time so that I get kind of a random selection here. Or maybe even just tap a few places. Okay. Yeah, there we go. We'll just tap. That way we're getting kind of a randomized selection. And then I expand that selection with Control plus sign. I'm going to right click and go to Geometry Assignment, create surface from selected, and this is going to be L hair strands random 1. Then I'll hide that group, or that surface group, and I'll repeat that process again, just kind of randomly click in a few places. And we'll do that again. Geometry assignment, surface from selected, L hair strands random 2. Okay. And then there's one more group that I want to do. Since I have some little guys out here, and I want to pick up a couple of small, thin pieces that I see floating around. And I'm going to call this last one L hair flyaways. So, L hair flyaways. What that's going to allow us to do now is have different transmaps specifically for these different sections, and then that's just going to help fluff the hair out. It's going to give it more chaos, layers of differences, so you don't spot the same texture being used over and over so much. So now let's hide all of our left hair elements. Let's go and repeat this process for the right hair. Okay, so, and since I don't like typing, I'm going to double click in here and just copy the name from one of these left hairs. And we'll do a few random taps. And then expand it. Right click, geometry assignment, surface from selected. Paste that and just change to an R at the beginning. That's random 1. And then we're going to hide that newly created group. And again, we're just going to tap through a bunch of places so we get some just random selection made. Then expand that selection, right click, geometry assignment, create surface from selected. And that's R strands random 2. Now I'll hide that. And now the last bit that I'm going to do the right side is going to be some flyaways. Now I'll right click, geometry assignment, surface from selected, and this is R, hair, flyaways. Okay. So now let's hide all of those right hair elements. Bring up our rear hair strands. And exact same process again. Just hold Control, click on a few random places. You can probably hear my pen tapping. Probably do a few more back here since there's a little more bulk to the hair in the rear. Then we'll right click, geometry assignment, create surface from selected. It's going to be rear hair strands random. See why I hate typing? Random 1. Select all that because I don't feel like typing that again. Then we'll hide those, feed it. And then expand our selection, right click, geometry assignment, create face group from selected, random 2. Did I mess that up? Interesting. Oh, there it is. Oh, couldn't see it. No, 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 no. I want this guy. Sorry. My bad. Ah, that's what I did. Ooh, that was a bit of a mistake there. I'll have to fix that. I accidentally made it a group instead of a surface. That's okay. We can fix that shortly. And let's hide that. And grab a few strands here and there to make rear hair flyaways. Rear hair flyaways. And while I still have this stuff hidden and selected the way it is, I want to make sure that I come back through here and just let's hide everything except that guy. So just gotta fix a little mistake that I made there. It's clear selection. Grab just that one. Gonna hide unselected. Grab these. Those needed to go with R here 3. Cool. Hide them. Those need to go back to R here 2. And then we will hide them. And those go to rear hair 1. There we go. That's better. So now we have surfaces created for all of that stuff. Let's hide all these guys. Let's grab our, that can go away. Let's grab our trans hairs group. And I'm going to leave that one alone. I'm good with that one. So let's show everything now. So geometry visibility, show all polygons. And now if we go to our surfaces tab, you'll see all the different surfaces that we have set up. So I'm going to set all of those. I'm going to go ahead and set all of those to iRay, like so. And now we can start plugging in textures. So I'm going to start with a base color. Browse. Let's see. Let's go runtime, textures, CG bytes, hair. Let's start with just basic blonde. Okay. There now we have textures applied through all of that. We'll end up having to change the scalp one out, but I'm just going to apply the same thing to all of it right now just to get the settings started. So then we'll go down to cutout opacity. Let's go to browse and pick something to start with. Let's start with our thick to thin. Then I'm going to go to my scalp and change that out on my scalp transmap. And then we're going to change the base color out on that to our scalp color. And then I'll click on that color and we'll select something pretty close to that kind of dirty blonde tone that we have. And let's turn on iRay now and start looking at it that way and see what we get. So iRay tends to get a little finicky with a lot of transparency maps, just so you know. You know, with a lot of mesh that has transmapping, it can bog it down a bit. So this may take us a second to get a preview. So while we're waiting on that, if anyone has any questions or comments or anything you'd like to talk about in the chat, please go ahead and fire something off. Let me know what you're thinking. Looking back through the chat, I see looks like Marcos DK was having some lag issues. Sorry about that, Marcos. Phyllis says not experiencing lag. That's good. Gregory Cook has got to go. This was awesome. Looking forward to rewatching and getting some hands-on work. Thanks, Les. Gregory, you're quite welcome. Glad you could be with us. So now we have some preview showing. I'm going to select all these materials, and we're going to turn our glossy layered weight all the way off because we don't want that on with hair. We could do some mapping with that, but that's another subject for another day. Right now, I want to turn that off, and we're going to just get started with some basic material setups here. Turn this around where we can really see a lot of the volume of the hair. So we'll turn the glossy layered weight off. We don't want any of this other stuff turned on. We don't want any reflectivity, no refraction, none of it. None of that stuff at all. Okay. And so now let's go through and change out the trans maps that are on some of our different materials. So let's go to our random 1 materials, go down to our trans map, cut out opacity, go to browse, and I'm going to select my hair thinner trans for that. And then let's grab random 2. Grab hair thinner that. And then I think I'm just going to use hair thinner trans for the flyaways as well. Yeah. And then I definitely want that on my trans hairs, trans area hairs. So the last thing I'm going to do in this session with this is go to Edit, Figure, Geometry, convert it to sub D. That way we'll see it smooth in the viewport. And there you go. Let's come over to our parameters, select that hair. Let's set that resolution to display in high resolution in the viewport. So now you can see it all nice and smooth. And then if we want to look at the results of, let's say, Miss V's short flip, turn that up. So one thing I'm definitely going to do is add a little bit of shaping and some stuff to the transitional hairs, just so we can have a little more control over those. But there you have it. That's about a 95% finished. I've got a few little touches I want to add to it with adding a few more controls, a few more shapes, things like that. But everything else that I have left to do to this is just some stuff that you guys have already seen the techniques. I'm just going to add a few more little bells and whistles to it. So that really will take you there. Everything that you've seen done between last week and this week, really a lot this week. Like last week was kind of the intro that got us up to where we had our meshes and everything. This week is really where we got into the fun stuff, got into the really crazy part where you can, do just so much with it. I'm a big fan of getting bang for your buck, and both as a user and as a creator. I feel like as a creator, content creator, when you create things that have versatility, that's value, and there's so many products out there. There's so many things that I see released that look great in their promo images, or it's like, oh, that looks really cool, but then you start looking at it deeper, or maybe you even sink the money in to buy it, and you find out, oh, it really is just what I saw in the image. Not really going to get anything out of it beyond that. That bothers me so much. Oh my God, that bugs me. Because we have, as creators, we have all these tools. We have all these cool things that we can do. And people, people work hard for their money. We work hard for our money, and people work hard for their money. When they spend their money on this stuff, I want to give them something cool, something that's going to work and give them a lot of different options. So, and give them a kind of functionality that I think should be in product. So that's what I've tried to teach you guys, in these last 2 weeks with these, with this advanced hair rigging, is kind of show you what I think hair content really should be like. So that is going to bring it to a close for this week. I did ran over by almost, by 40 some minutes. But I thank you folks for sticking around. I know they ended up being, I started a few minutes early, and it's ended up being almost a 3-hour seminar this week. But I thank you guys for coming out and watching, sticking around. I hope that you guys I hope that what I've shown you has been valuable, has really been useful, and you guys will take it and play with it. Also, keep an eye out. We'll make an announcement on when the freebies from these are available. It should be any day now. We'll have this nice suite of Zbrush tools, and some that are specific, like I said, some that are specifically related to this hair setup. And we'll make all that stuff available for you guys so that you can make your own kits based in this stuff. You can make add-ons to this. That'll be a freebie, and I think that, I would actually be really curious to see, how that does. See if you guys, make some morph kits that add on to this one, because since this is a freebie, a lot of people are going to get it, and that's just kind of cool. So anyway, oh man, yeah, this has been 2 really packed weeks. There's a lot of stuff that we've gone over here. And no doubt in my mind that somewhere down the road we'll probably come back and touch it again, because there's just so much here. So this coming week, I am going to be finalizing my schedule for the next quarter. We're scheduling these out quarterly. So I got a great list of stuff put together from our conversation over the last couple of weeks. Some interesting stuff coming up. We've been debating a lot about changing the time frame on when we do these, changing the schedule. And I'm still very torn about that. I want to hear input from you guys, either here or in the comments or on the in the Facebook group. Definitely want to get input from you guys on what are good time frames. Part of me wants to change it, and part of me wants to keep it at 1 o'clock on Fridays. So there's some internal conversations at CG Bytes we're going to have about that, but I definitely want to get your voices in those conversations, because at the end of the day, it really is for you guys, and I don't want to lose the core group of people who come here every week. I know you guys really, it's great seeing the same folks here every week, and we want to try to open it up to get more people in, because I think there is some value to what we're offering here, and maybe a lot of folks aren't quite getting that. So anyway, that's just a little update on what's going on that end of things. So probably within the next week, probably next week's show, actually, we'll be able to announce, if there's going to be a scheduling change, we'll be able to announce that then, and we'll be able to give you guys a schedule for the next quarter, or at least start to introduce some of that stuff. Like, I'll have it set, but I don't totally want to like introduce the entire schedule up front, because if we need to change something midstream, I'd rather not have that set in stone. So Miss V says 10 is too late. Wednesday at 8 maybe. And this is just full disclosure here, you guys. Outside of this stuff, I am like the other part of my life besides doing art is I'm deeply involved in martial arts. And so 4 nights a week in the evening, I train and help train people. So there's like 2 hours in the evening that I can't be available for that. So that's why if we move it to an evening time frame, it's probably going to have to be like around 9 or 10 p.m. If it's from Monday through Thursday, anytime during the week on those days. If we move it to an evening time, it'll have to be 9 or 10 p.m. at least. Or I can do it in the afternoon on one of those days, like maybe 3 or 4 o'clock. Something like that is quite doable too. So those are kind of the optimum times for me. I like trying to keep it in a time frame that overlaps with a lot of time zones for where folks are concentrated who are interested in this. So that's another thing that we have to think about. There's a lot of stuff that we're talking about. Oh, good. Someone had asked about what's coming up next week, and I see Jason has got that, got the answer up there for that. That's good. Yeah. Next week we're going to be going over doing enhancements, like taking clothing and enhancing it for character sets that sit on the G3 chassis. So let's say you have Genesis 3 female, and you apply Rune to her, and the clothing you're using doesn't have doesn't automatically have custom-made adaptations for that character in it. DS will auto-generate a lot, and those will get you there a lot of the time. But frequently, we'll run into instances where a particular character setup might need a little more TLC than what the auto-generated morphs can do. So there's some different considerations for that. And for us as content creators, I find that that while you can rely on the auto-generated morphs to a degree, like you always want to double check. You put some clothing on. If the auto-generated morphs work, great, cool. If it looks good, don't mess with it. But if you find a place where you can make an enhancement or a change, then you should. And that's really what we're going to go over next week. So it's interesting. It's kind of in that neat area where user experience and user techniques that are important to users overlap with things that we do as content creators, and so it's actually kind of a neat topic that I think will have a lot of interest for both just the general user and the content creator. I dig those kind of topics. I think those are neat. So. I see some folks piping up now that we're closing. I see some people talking and introducing themselves. Design photo. Hi there. Also here. Also next week, 1 hour later, summer time. Need finally got here. Let's see. Nick Silver, UK. Yeah, Nick. More enhancing the morphs is actually not a difficult thing. We're going to be focusing on it with Zbrush. So if you're not a Zbrush user, that might be an issue. But most of the folks coming on board here, especially the content creators, most of us are using Zbrush now, and so that's really where I'm going to be focusing, because that's where most of the functionality is going to come from. It's really the best environment for working on that sort of thing. Though I do tend to try and teach conceptually, so that even if I'm using ZBrush, the concepts I show there can still be applied a lot of times out of Blender or any number of other programs. So I do use ZBrush. Awesome. Yes, ZBrush users unite. So guys, it is coming upon 4 o'clock. It's going to put me actually an hour past time, which is just another hour you guys got. And so I hope it was cool. Hope you all dig it. Be sure to catch the rewatch. Be sure to be back here, same bat time, same bat channel next week. Lots of cool stuff going on, cool announcements and things headed up for the future of our little program here. So thanks everybody, and as always, thanks to Jason and Terry for manning the chat, and CG Bytes for putting these things together, and bringing me on board to help you guys maybe pick up a few tips, tricks, skills, whatnot. So, yeah, that's going to bring us to a close. You guys have a good week. Keep making cool stuff. I'll catch you guys around. Bye.